The silence of the universe. Albert Camus once wrote, "The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world." This statement captures the essence of his philosophical vision, a world without inherent meaning, inhabited by beings desperate to find one. Camus did not deny the absence of divine order, nor did he despair in it. Instead, he sought a way to live joyfully and courageously in spite of it, not through resignation but through revolt. His was a philosophy of living without appeal, of loving life even when stripped of transcendence. Born in French Algeria in 1913, Camus lived through colonial injustice, 2 world wars, and the moral crisis of Europe's 20th century. His thought cannot be separated from his context, a world disillusioned by ideology and scarred by violence. Through essays, novels, and plays, Camus forged an existential humanism that rejected both nihilism and totalitarianism. To him, meaning was not found in the universe, but created through the act of living itself. See the absurd, confronting a meaningless world. Camus' philosophy begins with the absurd. Unlike existentialists such as Sartre or Kierkegaard, who located meaning in subjective choice or divine faith, Camus focused on the collision between human longing and the universe's indifference. Humans crave order, purpose, and explanation, yet the cosmos remains silent. In the Myth of Sisyphus, 1942, he describes this confrontation vividly. The absurd is the divorce between man and his life, the actor and his setting. When we awaken to the realization that life offers no final answers, we face a moment of existential vertigo, a recognition that the search for meaning is futile in a meaningless universe. However, Camus' brilliance lies in what follows. He refuses despair. The absurd does not demand suicide or submission. It demands lucidity. One must stare into the void and still affirm life. To live with the absurd, he writes, is to live without appeal, without recourse to God's fate or ultimate truth. This tension forms the bedrock of Camus' philosophy. The absurd cannot be resolved. It can only be embraced. To deny it through false hope, whether in religion, ideology, or reason, is to betray the human condition. Instead, one must accept the absurd as a condition of freedom. The myth of Sisyphus, the logic of revolt. Camus' central metaphor is that of Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a mountain, only for it to roll back down, eternally. To most, this is the image of futility, but to Camus, it becomes the model of human dignity. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, he concludes. The act of revolt, the continuous struggle, becomes the meaning itself. The joy lies not in reaching the summit, but in pushing the stone, in the conscious defiance of absurdity. This is the foundation of Camus's ethic. We are free precisely because the universe offers no guarantees. Camus thus transforms despair into liberation. When nothing is predetermined, everything is possible. Life becomes an act of creation, not of discovering truth, but of choosing how to live. As he puts it, to live is to keep the absurd alive. The logic of revolt is moral as well as existential. It is a refusal to yield to nihilism, to affirm life without illusion, and to find joy in the struggle itself. The outsider, Camus' fiction as philosophy. Camus' fiction breathes life into his ideas. The Outsider, 1942, introduces Meursault, an emotionally detached man who kills an Arab on a sun-drenched beach for no reason. At his trial, society condemns him not for murder, but for his refusal to feign remorse or adhere to moral convention. Meursault becomes a mirror of the absurd man, one who lives truthfully without pretending to meaning. Yet unlike Sisyphus, Meursault lacks revolt until the end. Only in prison awaiting execution does he embrace the indifference of the universe. I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. Through Meursault, Camus illustrates that authenticity lies in acceptance, not deceit. Life has no higher purpose, yet it can be lived beautifully once stripped of pretense. Similarly, The Plague, 1947, and The Fall, 1956, explore moral responsibility in an absurd world. In The Plague, the townspeople of Oran confront a deadly epidemic, not with faith, but with solidarity. Camus' message In the face of meaninglessness, the only moral response is human compassion and endurance. Revolt and the human condition. For Camus, the recognition of absurdity is only the first step. What follows is revolt, the conscious and perpetual refusal to be reconciled with meaninglessness. This revolt is not a political uprising alone, but a metaphysical attitude, a spiritual stance of defiance against the void. To revolt is to affirm life without appeal to higher powers. Camus writes, "I rebel, therefore we exist." In that simple reversal of Descartes' formula, he grounds human identity not in thought, but in moral resistance. To rebel is to say no to injustice, falsehood, and despair, while simultaneously saying yes to life itself. So unlike the nihilist, who sees no value in existence, or the religious believer, who places value beyond it, the person in revolt insists that life is enough. Camus' rebel is the artist, the worker, the thinker, anyone who refuses to surrender to futility. This stance has ethical implications. If there is no divine command, then morality must arise from solidarity, from the recognition of our shared condition. In The Plague, Dr. Rio continues his work even when he knows it cannot end suffering permanently. The only means of fighting a plague, he says, is honesty. Camus presents this as the true moral heroism, to act rightly, not because of hope but despite the absence of it. Revolt thus becomes a new foundation for meaning, not as an answer to absurdity, but as a way of living within it. To be human for Camus is to revolt against absurdity without denying it, to find value not in eternity, but in the finite act of resistance. Political morality and the rebel. In The Rebel, 1951, Camus extends his philosophy from the individual to the collective. He asks, what happens when an entire society confronts the absurd? Can rebellion remain pure, or does it inevitably lead to violence? Camus distinguishes between metaphysical revolt, the rebellion of the spirit against meaninglessness, and historical revolt, which often turns ideological. He warns that revolutions seeking absolute justice tend to become tyrannical. When rebellion forgets its limits, it becomes what it opposes. He saw this danger realized in the totalitarian ideologies of the 20th century. Marxism, fascism, and other utopian movements, in his view, replaced God with history, turning political dogma into new forms of faith. The ends justify the means, they claimed, but for Camus this was the death of morality. Camus' rebel, by contrast, resists both oppression and absolute ideology. True rebellion, he argues, must affirm human dignity while recognizing human limits. Freedom without restraint becomes domination. Justice without mercy becomes tyranny. In this moral vision, Camus' humanism shines. The world may lack ultimate meaning, but we can still create local, provisional ones, acts of kindness, justice, art, and love that defy absurdity through their very fragility. The rebel was controversial, alienating his former friend Jean-Paul Sartre, who accused him of political quietism. But Camus was not advocating passivity. He was defending integrity. In an age of ideological murder, he proposed something radical: moderation, compassion, and ethical rebellion. Love, death, and the limits of nihilism. Camus' confrontation with absurdity always circles back to two ultimate realities: love and death. Death, for him, is the ultimate confirmation of the absurd, the reminder that all human striving ends in nothing. Yet rather than diminish life, this knowledge intensifies it. Come to terms with death, he wrote, thereafter anything is possible. To live fully is to live with death in mind, to appreciate the present moment precisely because it will vanish. In this awareness lies joy, the sunlit acceptance of mortality without illusion. Love likewise becomes an act of revolt. To love another person in a meaningless universe is to create meaning where none existed. Love, art, and friendship, these are Camus' sacred rebellions. They defy absurdity not by denying it, but by embracing the fleeting beauty of human connection. Camus was a sensualist as well as a philosopher. His Algerian upbringing filled his work with sunlight, sea, and earth, symbols of immediacy and vitality. Against the cold abstractions of European nihilism, he offered the warmth of lived experience. His was not a philosophy of despair, but of measured joy. Even in the face of death, Camus insisted on life. "There is no love of life without despair of life," he wrote, acknowledging the paradox. True vitality includes sorrow, but transcends it through acceptance. In this balance of awareness and defiance, sorrow and beauty, lies Camus' deepest wisdom. Camus versus Sartre, the divide between ethics and ideology. The intellectual break between Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre was one of the most famous schisms in 20th century philosophy. Initially allies in existentialism and anti-fascist resistance, they diverged sharply after the publication of The Rebel. Sartre's existentialism emphasized freedom through engagement, even if that meant aligning with revolutionary violence to overthrow oppressive systems. Camus, by contrast, held that murder, even in the name of justice, negates the very values rebellion seeks to defend. For him, no end could justify the denial of another's humanity. This moral line defined their split. Sartre saw Camus as politically naive. Camus saw Sartre as morally compromised. History, Camus warned, cannot be the source of value, for it is blind to individual suffering. To justify the end, he wrote, is to deny man. Their debate remains relevant today. Camus' insistence on ethical limits continues to resonate in an age of ideological polarization. He reminds us that rebellion must remain rooted in compassion, not dogma. Camus' vision was both tragic and luminous, a call to integrity in a world without certainty. In choosing humanity over ideology, he positioned himself as philosophy's moral conscience, the thinker who refused both nihilism and fanaticism. Legacy, the modern relevance of Camus' thought. Albert Camus died in a car accident in 1960 at the age of 46. His manuscript, The First Man, unfinished. Yet his influence endures in literature, philosophy, and moral thought. In an age still haunted by absurdity, by war, disinformation, and existential anxiety, Camus speaks with renewed clarity. His philosophy offers not escapism, but engagement, to live lucidly, love deeply, and act justly, without illusion. Camus' emphasis on solidarity prefigures modern human rights discourse. His rejection of ideological violence anticipates contemporary debates on extremism. Even his reflections on the environment, the reverence for sunlight, sea, and earth, anticipate ecological consciousness. Modern readers find in Camus a rare balance of skepticism and compassion. He teaches us that the absence of meaning need not lead to despair, it can lead to freedom. The absurd does not paralyze, it awakens. Live to the point of tears, he wrote. That is the essence of his philosophy, to live so fully, so consciously, that even the brevity of existence becomes a source of beauty. Choosing to live without appeal. Camus' philosophy is not a closed system, but a way of being, a discipline of honesty, courage, and compassion in a meaningless world. He offers no metaphysical answers, no promises of redemption. Instead, he gives us the tools to face life as it is, fleeting, unjust, magnificent. The absurd man, the rebel, the artist, the lover, all are united by one truth. They refuse resignation. They create meaning through their acts, their art, their defiance. In embracing the absurd, they achieve a kind of grace. Camus' universe is silent, but not empty. It resounds with the laughter of those who, like Sisyphus, continue to push their stones uphill, not in despair, but in joy. In that laughter, humanity finds its dignity. To live without appeal is not to live without hope. It is to root hope in the world itself. In the face of absurdity, Camus does not ask us to believe, he asks us to live.